Of the Acton Finance Committee to order. And first order of business on the agenda is public participation. We have a particularly empty room tonight. Truly empty room tonight. I won't take it personally. Summertime. There we go. There we go. Summertime. The next item on the agenda is a quick review of what happened at the last ALG meeting. Unfortunately, Roland can't make it tonight, so you're going to have to take my word for it until the meeting minutes come out. It was definitely a get-to-know-you meeting. It was not a heavy lift meeting by any stretch. The first one of the year. We did have we argued about verbiage on what constitutes quorum. We had a conversation about. You look incredulous.
How is that arguable?
Well, the definition of the word "and" it matters. Because you have to have, it said you had to have two members of the board and staff. We don't have any staff. So anyway, I won't take you through it. The other thing which we're gonna investigate, seeing if we can't move the meetings to nighttime to be accommodating to Roland and to anybody else who works. Then the only real takeaway that I do want to share with the whole committee is we did reiterate our stance, because it was said very early that anything that was discussed last year is gone and can't encumber this year's ALG, so we have to start over. And so we staked out again nice and early that we believe that reserves should be used for capital, and they promptly responded with, well, we hear you that reserves should be done for one-time items. Respectfully, there's a difference between one-time items and reserves, so we might need to be a little crystal clear in our POV or in another communication, if that is the will of the committee, that we are going to stick to the using reserves for capital and not necessarily one-time things. Yes, Mr. Burgart.
Question, they didn't feel a sense like we do that there should be some sort of carry forward consensus things that they can either agree to change or not change, but starting at zero seems to be quite draconian.
They explicitly, and again, this is only my second year on ALG, so I will defer to people who've been there for more years than I have, but they made it explicit that one ALG, one Board of Selectmen cannot encumber future, period, full stop, and it was definitely a sense of restate and restake your most fervently held beliefs, lest they be forgotten. Mr. Majors, you did a couple of years on the ALG. Would you concur that that's the modus operandi of the?
I think that's correct. Steve can comment.
I was going to go to him next, but you were the chair before he was.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yes.
Mr. Noon, do you concur?
Absolutely. However, it has been the tradition that the starting point for each ALG is the last ALG plan.
And so it was with this as well.
So you may not encumber them, but you will start from that point.
Yep.
So you're not starting from zero.
And it was also raised both by me and by the member of the public that spoke, that we do definitely want to see actual numbers, and not just take our new numbers for the new budget cycle from the previous year's budget numbers. We'd prefer to do it from the actual numbers. And of course, there was pushback to that, as there always is, as the actuals aren't out yet, and we'll see when we can get that done. So that dance continues to occur, unchanged from years past. I see nodding of heads from at least one previous member.
I think they agreed last year to have actuals.
They agreed to do it, but where is it? They did agree to do it in principle last year. Let's see when the numbers arrive. And with Brian not here tonight, Brian is out. So with him not here tonight, we'll just have to remind him that they said that last year. Yes, there will be a proposed schedule for the next ALG meetings, which which will determine whether we're back in the mornings or back at night. And I'll make sure to share that list with you for you who wish to
Mr. Chairman,
attend.
there was a time, and it goes back a good many years at this point, where ALG did meet at night. Not always at night, but sometimes in the morning and sometimes at night. But in probably the last 7 or 8 years, it's only been in the morning.
And it's not a hard and fast request that we move it, but it was a, can we get a sense of the 10 if they'd be willing to do it at night? So we'll see what comes of it. I expect future ALG meeting minutes to be more interesting than this. Apologize for the time taken on this one. Okay. We have had a copier malfunction, so we do not have the presentation that I'm going to lean to. Can we throw it up there and there?
Yeah, I just don't know how.
Okay, let's take a minute to try and figure out how to get this up and running on the big screen. By way of introduction to this all came, the genesis of this, the reason why I asked Christine to take care of this tonight, is this grew out of the famous $4.4 million in health, safety, and welfare that was actually in our point of view last year, and had been discussed on slide 8 last year, and had been discussed in a couple of different cases. It did come to a head at the end of the year last year, and so with a new school liaison to discuss it with them, and an outgoing superintendent, so you may have to recirculate this with the new superintendent.
I may have to.
I asked Christine to please pull together a status of where we are on this 4.4 million. So with that, take it away.
All right, just quickly, in 2015, we hired Dorn Whittier Architects to perform a study of our current capital improvement needs for all school-related buildings. We received the final report in February of 2016. It was a 615-page report. It identified, based on 7 distinct categories, health and safety, code compliance, functional use, handicap accessibility, extending building lifespan, energy efficiency, and hazardous material abatement costs. This exhaustive report has since been referred to as the CIP. I asked Bill if this report seemed unusually large and if he felt we were not giving building maintenance the attention it deserved. He said that this report could be reflected in any like district with buildings as old as ours, and he did not see anything concerning or surprising in this report. So I found that comforting with the outside perspective. So over the course of the following year, JD Head and Glenn Brand worked with Dorn Whittier to assess and recategorize the improvements list. After we received MSBA approval for the replacement of the, no idea why that happened. That's it. It's over. I'm done. Thank you. It did. My computer did not, but the screen is bent. Yes, good. All right, after we received MSBA approval for the replacement of the Douglas School, they pulled out costs associated with updating Douglas and other buildings they believed would be updated with the new building project. The list was then broken down into 4 categories with a 3-level priority system, again, in conjunction with Dorn Whittier. This was JD, Glenn Brand, and Dorn Whittier. Items that are handled under typical maintenance were removed, such as replacing playground mulch, Dorn Whittier pointed that out at every one of our sites and put in costs for it, but it's something we do yearly. It's regular maintenance. So those things were removed, as well as fixes the district did not think needed to happen right away. Other changes to the prioritization included grouping fixes, such as we might have had a health and safety concern of a roof repair, but there might have been other maintenance on that same roof. And so they regrouped things so that if we fixed a roof, it satisfied the health and safety, but it also reprioritized other things so we could do it all in one fell swoop. The remaining improvements that still fell under health and safety came to roughly $4.4 million, which is how we got that figure.
When you say they held repairs listed as Douglas and other potentially included buildings, did they pull repairs to all 4, Douglas, Gates, Conant, and the admin building?
So I would say that they moved forward on any potentially serious issues and addressed them, but any that they thought they might be able to hold off on, they put aside until we know for sure which schools are going to be included in the projects. I was satisfied with the list that he showed me, that they didn't put us in any kind of jeopardy and that they made smart choices.
Okay, but it's also possible that if it gets decided that it's going to be Douglas Gates or Douglas Conant,
right,
at least one building's worth of what was left is going to come back.
Yes, they will readdress. Yes, absolutely. Okay. In the spring of 2017, Glenn Brand is let go. Bill McAuliffe did not become aware of the $4.4 million health and safety number or of any prior capital improvement planning committees until we brought it to his attention the last time he came to our FINCOM meetings to present the budget. So he has since worked diligently to discover the source of the number and the ambiguity around what has been done to address the identified issues. It seems that the reconfiguration of the list and the committee were both a casualty of the superintendent shuffle. He shared our frustration with the perceived lack of attention or transparency But he felt confident that we could assume a level of interaction in the future that would ensure we could all confidently vote affirmative for future school budgets. So where are we now? Although our inability to acquire that checklist that would allow us to understand the progress being made on the health and safety items, the work has been getting done. Mr. McAuliffe was able to locate the prioritized list, and we went through it together item by item. I was satisfied that attention was being paid to the priority 1 items, and that most were being completed well under the cost estimates proposed by Doran Whittier. They had automatically added things like hazmat fees, design firm fees, contingency, and architectural fees to every project across the board. This means that every fix we do or have done in-house is going to come in at significantly less than what they projected. And again, there were some in the health and safety category that we handle on a yearly basis. And it was just a matter of timing that they happened to cross them and added them to their report.
Do you have a ballpark? You said that with all those design fees and hazmat, et cetera, that everything is going to come in.
So everything was upcharged about 40%. If
Okay.
you added in all of the fees.
So would it be, the answer is to this is probably yes, but it would be a gross oversimplification to take the $120 million and take 40% off the top of it and say that's what our real bogey is? Or is that?
It may be that simple. Nothing that we have addressed has come in at what they proposed cost. It has all come in significantly less. Very little have we had to outsource. There were a couple of things where they said, go back and check on the warranty for roofing issues, and they did. Bill said that JD is actually like all on top of our warranties and make sure that we don't pay for anything we don't have to. And so we've been able to handle a lot of it in-house and without all the overhead costs. All right. Okay, so what comes next? This is what we wanted, a 5-year plan. So at this time, Bill has taken a look at our capital projects and made a target list for the next 5 years. This list remains quite volatile until we know for certain which buildings will be included in the Douglas School project, such as Gates, Conant, and the preschool portion of the admin building. Apparently, there will be a working group meeting within the next few weeks that will be made up of J.D. Head, Marie Altieri, Peter Light, and Dave Verdellini, who will go over it and confirm or alter the plan where they feel appropriate. That plan will then go to the newly reconstituted Regional Capital Subcommittee for review. They will then share their findings with both the Acton and Boxborough FinComs, and then the plan goes to the school committee for a full approval vote on the plan for year 1 improvements by the end of September, with the goal that it's part of the budget discussions. And then the process is to be repeated the following year so that the 5-year plan is constantly updated and we have a 1-year capital plan ready for each budget cycle. And that's where you'll see the changes once we realize which schools are going to be included in the projects. All right, so 2 final items that don't actually have anything to do with the 4.4 million health and safety. We have spoken in the past about our concerns about the ABEA contracts. These contracts resulted in pay increases that exceeded 10% over the course of 3 years. Bill let me know that this was true across the state, that apparently from the time of the recession and through the next 8 or so years, teachers were only getting 1 to 1.3% pay increases on average. And they were not keeping up with the cost of living, and that this was a right-sizing contract period for many school districts. This was not uncommon, and he said we could expect future contracts to be much more conservative. And then the second thing was that he stated that we have an amazing district with a fantastic staff. I did not sense that he was paying lip service. He seemed genuinely impressed and said that he truly enjoyed himself here despite the upheaval he walked into, and he feels we've turned a corner and is very pleased and hopeful in our current direction. That's it.
Can you go to the previous slide?
Yes.
Do we have any more information on what that regional capital subcommittee is going to be, what it's going to be comprised of, and how frequently it's going to meet?
I will find out for you.
Thank you. We'll do a whip around the room, see if anyone has any questions. Let's start on the end. Mr. Noon, do you have any questions that arose from this?
Well, first, nice job, Christine.
Thanks.
Not sure everything was entirely accurate, but you were told what you were told. I invented the 4.4 million, by the way, so I know exactly.
Could you be referring to how could that possibly have been the first time you heard about it on the last, is that what you're recommending?
I believe I am, yes.
Bill managed to math his way to it for me.
Be that as it may,
Sure.
yes. When all said they had no idea where the number was coming from, I did eventually send them the exact reference from the Doran Whittier report as to where the numbers came from. And it wasn't just in last year's point of view, it was in the year before's point of view. So a lot of people have been claiming they don't know anything about it. I am concerned, I was a Douglas parent at one point. They still need to get work done at that school because it's how many years before it's replaced?
Best case scenario, at this point, 5.
Right. So
Best case.
most of the kids in Douglas won't see the new school, and it was in poor shape to begin with. So I hear what you're saying, that they're addressing things, but they also are kind of saying, well, we don't have to address Douglas because we're going to replace it. But
I think they're holding back on big ticket items. I did not, anything on that report that was small or easy to go in and do, they have done.
there are a lot of things like paving and things that,
Yep.
probably were taken care of or should be taken care of every year. However, my youngest went to Douglas. She's 30 now. The place wasn't in good shape then. It hasn't gotten much better. And waiting another 5 years to do even big ticket things is a little scary.
I hear you.
Sunanda? No? Dave?
Just out of curiosity, that the A+ score we saw, that was a self-assessment versus an independent,
I was just looking for cutesy GIFs to put on the page.
what I thought. But it's a good summary, thank
It
you.
was more that I felt Bill gave us an A+, not necessarily that I personally say that we were getting an A+. That was what I was going for. He really, we talked about his future. He's not planning to, his wife is retiring next year. He's not planning to continue to be an interim superintendent. I just got the sense that he frankly was impressed with our district and with the people he worked with here all around. That was nice.
Could you go back one slide, please? On your final bullet there, wash and repeat. Will we be extending this for a rolling 5 years? So every year, 1 year will fall off and a fifth will
Yes.
pop on?
Yeah,
And that'll be without the benefit, though, of an updated Dora and Whittier study?
right. The Doran Whittier was a one-time look at what
What was really needed?
what was really needed, exactly. And then they worked with Doran Whittier to reprioritize, recategorize, and I have that categorization sheet that I will email this to you, and I will email you the report that JD is now working off of. So yeah, the idea is to continually reassess the capital needs on an every single year, looking at what can we do this year and what's in the 5-year.
Great, thank you for your report.
Thanks.
That does bring the question, how frequently should we do this type of outside assessment? Apparently it's been many, many years before this recent round. We kind of had an embarrassment of riches by having both a school report and a town report within a year of each other. What's the sense of the committee? Is this something that we should be doing every 10 years, 15 years, 5 years? What do we think?
What was the cost of the Dora and Whittier report, the 512 pages?
It was pretty expensive, actually. I'd have to go back and get the number, but it was not a $20,000 thing. It was a substantial.
First phase was maybe 150,000, and there was another phase. And of course, I guess we could get a 40% discount if the numbers were all inflated by that amount. But my memory goes back a fairly long time, and this was the first time either the town or the schools, in my recollection, engaged in any study like this, so I would say, yeah, you better do it at least every 10 years.
Every 10. Okay. Anybody want to quibble with that number? Okay. Should that be one of our recommendations when we talk to the superintendent?
I recommend we talk to someone in the town or other districts. I'm sure there's a schedule on which this is done, rather than us walking in and saying, we think 10 sounds like a good number.
Okay. Which groups would you point to for us to discuss and see what the standard operating procedure is for other towns? I mean, I get the feeling that we did this catch as catch can. I don't think there was a plan behind this. I think this was just something that had been asked for years. So
It had been in several of our point of views for a couple of years that we needed to look at the conditions of our existing buildings, and yeah,
but Chris,
they got around to it. But then again, these are now 3 years old. And we've started to do, I mean, trying to go for any frequency less than 10 years is, by the time you get started on the thing, you're doing another study. It takes time to get these things done.
your point is not lost, Christy, that we don't want to be, dictating something in a vacuum. I get that.
If we had a superintendent who had been around the block for a long time, I'd say we ask them, how periodically can you do that? Also, be curious to know what the new town manager thinks, since there's a similar capital issue there, things to oversee.
Definitely worth the conversation. Happy to ask the question. Yeah. What I don't want it to do is I don't want it to be, we think we need to build a new building, let's go for a study. I'd prefer that we be more systematic about it than that. Tom?
We may also want to ask Doran Whittier what they recommend, knowing that they'll recommend something sooner than, it may be necessary. The other point to remember is that in 10 years, our new twin or triple school will be only 5 years old. So
Twin school.
So it shouldn't need a whole lot there. So it could probably be a much more condensed report.
Yeah, don't scare people by calling it a triple school, please. We fought that battle. To your point, I'm also going to just ask Skanska, which is the owner's project manager for the new building, and this is the type of question that we should be able to get that type of information from on a regular basis. So definitely take that into advice, and we'll follow up. Thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it. You are going to present this to, well, would you mind presenting the background of this to the superintendent when you have a chance to talk with him, and suggest that we not have another year where it gets lost?
Sure, yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I will also bring it up when I meet with him, but I want to make sure that I'm not the only one that says it. I almost think I should have a witness when I say it. Okay. Wow, this is going to be a very short meeting tonight. At this point, I wanted to move on just to high-level guidance for the point of view. I did not want to actually get into running through slides today. I think that we need to do that in one of the next 2 meetings, though. You're ahead of me, I see, which is great, but especially between the copier and the presentation thing tonight, let's just go through the high level of the things that are commonly contentious. Since we're early, and I mean, it's only 8 o'clock. We've been plowing through this. Let's do it.
Mr. Chair, I would like to point out that I drove all the way down from my place in New Hampshire for this meeting, so please don't adjourn in 45 minutes.
Fair enough. Well, then we're going to go through each and every one of these slides in great detail. you wanted me to cancel this meeting, you should have said something. Floor is yours, Christine. Christine.
All right, so I made a few updates where numbers are available. And so everywhere where I did, in italics, you'll see something like updated. This seems like it's still true and should stay part of the presentation. This we need to, oh, yep, sure.
I'm sorry, demographic indicators, well above state and county averages. I'm familiar with the things we point to.
Yep.
But are they really demographic? Well, is average salary considered a demographic? Is that the broad sense of demographics? As opposed to financial indicators show that we're well above state and other averages?
Sure.
I just the term demographic I usually see in terms of how many minorities, and it's not necessarily, it's the demographics of the town. But, oh, you get, yeah, all right.
Is it, we could,
I think demographics is, you know, a lot of the statistics we're getting we're getting from demographic, you know, like databases, the state, the census.
yep.
You know, a lot of them happen to do with dollars and cents, but, you know.
I'll leave that in for consideration.
You could put parenthetical financial/economic or something, just
And then we can hash it out because we like less words. Economic. All right. The reserves, we need to, of course, decide what our position is going to be on reserves. I believe you've already thrown your hat in the ring for keep them what we discussed last year.
And therein lies one of the first things that we're going to argue about numerous times, probably. Last year, our position last year was that we would allow for $2 million. We actually, it ended up getting boosted at the very end of, negotiations to about, was it 2.2 million in reserve use last year, with the expected turnback of 2 million. And that's, we'll see what the actual turnback is. But is that where we want to start again this year?
Well, hopefully we'll have a number to know what the actual estimated turnback is for this year before we have to take.
So they did have a number at ALG, but it was before the actual close of the year.
Preliminary.
It was super preliminary because it was still active. They still had 3 days to close
Right.
out POs and whatnot. But I will bring that number at the next meeting.
Okay.
I have a very basic question. What is a stabilization fund?
The stabilization fund differs from pure free cash in that it takes a 2/3 vote to take money out of a stabilization fund, whereas it only takes a majority vote to authorize the expenditure of free cash. They both are forms of reserve, but one has more strings attached to it than another. More strings attached to it, the 2/3 vote.
Okay. So these numbers are updated based on what is available right now. So we have a good unemployment rate. Yep.
might it make sense to move that ahead so that it follows the slide that says we compare well demographically? In 2 slides previously.
I can do that. Anybody reason not to? Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
I didn't hear what he said.
Oh, he just,
Might it make sense to move this slide forward once that it follows the bullet point, making the point that we are, demographically?
yeah, so we go from demographic indicators to, and here they are. Okay. Or financial, economic, wherever we end up landing. Okay. Oh, sorry, is everybody okay with this? All right, and we've looked at this. These are the reserves. And then I would also move this one then. I feel like these two need to stick together. This has also been updated. Yeah, sorry, Jason Christie's.
We had talked on this slide about turning this into the median income, because we had the median numbers previously, so I'd still like to make that change, so we're not doing average one place and median another.
Okay. I'm just going to find.
Christine,
Yep.
before we do that, we had comparative data last year on surrounding towns, which we chose not to use. I'm okay with going to median if we have the same ability to compare, because it may be something we want to do this year.
We do use it. We had it in the appendix. Is this what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
but nobody really looked at the appendix.
Yeah.
The only problem, we can get this from the state. The thing that pops in my head is many of the towns don't have schools in their tax rate. So it's a separate, they have apples and oranges. I would think, well.
No, they have school, they have education spending in their
Right,
tax
they
rate.
just, right, okay.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I
They are two
stand
different
corrected.
budgets, though, yeah.
But the trouble is you can't split it town versus school
Right.
for any of the towns. But you're right, lump sum, it all hits the bottom line.
And then reserves, right. I have not updated this graph. I will.
My favorite chart.
I will update it. And then we move on to our concerns. I don't think this changes. This is probably always a concern. And slow me down if I go for too fast. Yeah, Jeff.
I'm sorry, the previous slide?
Yep.
See, I think I mentioned before that that's the first bullet is misleading. I mean the 2.5, no more than 2.5, because the uninformed would say, oh, so my taxes only can go up 2.5%. So if the value of their house goes up 10%, that's not in the calculation at all. So their dollar tax bill, in fact, can go up substantially more than 2.5 without having any kind of an override. So that's why I keep suggesting that tax rate is not a very good thing to focus on. It's the dollars of the average, the median taxes paid, or whatever we choose to do. Dollars really is what you write your check for. And everybody I talk to, even very educated people, are always surprised that the value of their house changing has nothing to do with 2.5. Or that there's this cumulative sitting somewhere that we didn't charge in prior years, which we can do and circumvent 2.5. So I don't know what the right answer is. It's just, it's troublesome to me to give that message.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff's right, but it's a long-winded answer, which is pretty hard to convey to the general public. But what we cannot increase our tax rate more than 2.5%. However, assessments have nothing to do with the tax rate. Assessment is how we apportion the total tax bill among all the payers. So if your house increased in value, your taxes may go up more than 2.5% if you're relative to everybody else in town. If your house decreased in value relative to everybody else in town, you may get less than a 2.5% increase. But as Jeff said, most people, including very intelligent people, don't understand that the assessment is just about the way we share it, not about the total amount.
I'll also, just a little bit of embellishment of what you said. If it was a zero sum, I could almost live with it, because if your neighbor went up and I went down, it's a zero sum. But we actually budget that we're going to increase the value of the town. Not new building, but actually, I think part of the formulas we have Or is that part of our cushion?
The,
We have new building, but I thought we also had,
We have new growth that is based on permits, and if you're looking for the increase in value, yeah, that's where the turnbacks come from.
so that's part of the cushion. It's not in the, not in the pro forma, but it does go up every year.
And without Brian being here to see to say if it's true or not, I have rattling around in the back of my head and I want to verify this, but I believe they said something about they can't actually take that last year the total value of all the property in town was X and add a percentage to it for value growth. I don't believe they can do that, but I would want to verify that with Brian. They definitely can take new growth. They're allowed to add that in, but I don't think they're allowed to just say, the housing market went up 5% in Massachusetts this year, so we're just going to add 5% to the value. I don't believe they're allowed to do that.
And I'm assuming that you mean to the pro forma for the budget. Because they do go neighborhood by neighborhood and revalue
Yes, they do.
different places. So that's why I think Steve and I were saying it's one of those cushions that we don't budget for it because we can't,
Right.
but your point. But in fact, we always do it. And so that increase is an add back of why we exceed our revenue budget every year, because we can't budget for it, but it's a fact of life that town, I think, the latest thing I saw in real estate was like 7 or 8% the value of housing went up year over year in town. So the values are going up. Now, whether the assessors are increasing at the same rate, probably not. But they do look at sales, and if some sale of a house is substantially greater than its current assessment, they reevaluate that neighborhood.
I believe it's, I don't know whether they can't budget for the increase in value or they just, out of an abundance of caution, don't. Because property values do go down and property values do stagnate. And if you get tied into every year we're going to estimate an escalation in property values, one year you're going to get caught in a very tough position.
2009 comes to mind. Yeah.
I would suggest the first bullet is probably true, right? But that in itself isn't a concern necessarily, unless your expenses are running faster than what Prop 2.5 will allow you to tax. So I would suggest maybe we need to combine this slide, that first bullet, with something from the next slide. Really combine the two. The fact that Prop 2.5 limits your taxation isn't necessarily a concern, unless your expenditures are running faster than that. So you probably want to combine somehow those two slides.
Yeah, otherwise it could be inferred that we're suggesting that our concern is that we're restrained by 2.5, which is not actually our concern. Okay.
I have not updated the compensation. I only updated the 1 to 2, from the 1 to 3, because I assume we have moved up a year.
Except for the fact that turnbacks might be good and rich and we might be okay. And that therein lies the age-old argument about how should turnbacks be treated.
Jason, when the final numbers are in, on the expenses, I can update that compensation growth. I've got the Excel spreadsheet that tracks it from year to year.
Great. And the current compensation rate will exceed taxation. We'll have to revisit that once we have the final turnbacks from last year.
So address health and safety issues in the school buildings. We need to decide
I think
if we feel satisfied or not.
I'm prepared to pull out that first bullet under the 1 to 3 years, as long as we suggest that we'd like to make sure that we have a seat at the table with this new capital plan, with any capital planning committee for the town or the school district.
My sense was that they would present to us,
Well,
but that we would not.
That's why I would, well, so that's a question for the committee. Do we, as a committee, do we feel comfortable with saying that we'll let a working group and then a school-driven capital committee present to us after the fact, or do we want to try and insert ourselves into the process on the in the earlier phases? What is the will of the committee on this? My personal, I'll wait till the end, although I'm sure you can all read me like a book. Let's start on this end this time. Tom, what's your opinion on this? Do we want to, now that they're said they're going to make a 5-year plan, what's your feel on having them come to us for a blessing before the end of the year, or do we want to try and be part of the process at the beginning?
I think we ought to try to be part of the process, absolutely.
Mr. Majors?
Whether we have a veto or final say, but we ought to be part of the process.
I'm not under any delusion that we'd ever have a veto, but Mr. Majors, what's your opinion?
Well, I agree with Tom. See, I agree with Tom. It's hard to, well, as you said, we don't have a veto authority, and we're just, I guess our charter is advise and consent, so it's hard to be an influencer like we would want to be.
It sounds like from what you just said, advise and consent, we'd be cutting off the advise part if we allow them to come to us just at the end. That would just be a consent part, not an advise part.
On the other hand, we don't want to just be a rubber stamp to approve these budgets. We need to have some kind of input to at least make them justify those numbers, no matter what they are.
Thank you. Ms. Willinghoff?
Yeah, similar. I mean, these other committees, it's typically we're pretty involved in the process and, can at least occasionally speak to, concerns from a finance perspective. And I mean, I use the sewer committee as an example of one that, right now we're meeting once a month, and the meeting is a little rah-rah because the consultants are there and, there's a lot of positive energy about this project. But once the financial numbers start falling out of it, it becomes, oh, from my perspective, can the town afford X, Y, Z? Does this really, what will I recommend to the finance committee? And I think, being involved in the process from the beginning certainly gives you the background and knowledge about it. I think anything else is just foolish.
Ms. Anderson?
I don't think we're doing a good job for the town of Acton and our taxpayers if we're not contributing to the school's budgeting process at an earlier level. I also have a possibly completely wrong recollection that the main use of reserves last year was for the school budget, was driven by the needs in the school budget, or that we at least had to up what we handed over because.
So there were over $2 million of reserves used last year, or earmarked last year, and a chunk of them, 700,000 and change, was used for the single tier busing change, although we expect to capture some of that in future years when the formula from the state is finished. But it's definitely not all of the use of reserves is not driven strictly by school needs. Probably on the order of, 70 to 80%, like the rest of the budgets, like the rest of the way the budget shakes out, but not entirely, no.
Well, yeah, I think we need to try to be a part of as many of these discussions just in terms of long-term fiscal planning.
Ms. Pruitt?
With the limited knowledge that I have and I've been listening here, I think we should be involved from the beginning of the process rather than towards the end.
Mr. Burgart?
The biggest dollar spent is on capital, followed by labor and fringe.
Are you sure labor and fringe doesn't beat capital?
Not when you spend in hundreds.
For a new building, it'll be capital, but on any given year,
Well,
I think salaries outweigh it.
Just further supports, I think we should be involved in both those aspects because those are the two drivers of where we spend money. So the fact that we were blindsided by the 4% and just got it at the end, as opposed to having anybody participating, or at least trying to ask some intelligent questions so that the people who made the decisions would think about things that we think about. I agree that we should be interjected as much as we can on capital and on personnel.
Expanding the charter there, nice. Mr. Noon.
The Town Capital Committee, which at one time included representation in the school district, should be involved in the preparation of a five-year plan for both entities. At the moment, we have no representation from the schools, and even on the town side, we'd have to reconstitute the committee, and I'm not sure it's going to happen this summer. So I would go so far as to insist that we've been involved and not just give advice.
Thank you. Ms. Russell, you haven't had a chance to, you've been giving us information, you haven't had a chance to weigh in your opinion. What's your take on this?
I agree with the committee. I think we should be involved as quickly as possible.
Okay. Shockingly, I am in complete agreement with everything that's been said, and that's why I did ask when you were giving the presentation on the newly constituted fifth capital committee in the last 3 years, despite the fact that some have fallen aside. Yeah, I'm not at all comfortable with a working group from the school side coming to us after the fact. So with that as the sense of the committee, I think we should put it, we should put it in our point of view that we really strongly believe we should be part of this, we should have a seat at the table. But I also ask the leave of the committee to make sure to state that when I meet with the superintendent. Okay.
I'm wondering if we can delete this slide?
I'm fine with deleting it. We have asked, however, in years past, we have asked for a dashboard, which we can take this out entirely and have the dashboard request live on as the work output of the 5-year plan as well, make it be the responsibility of the new capital committee. But something we have asked for in previous years has been, okay, we had this bogey from D&W, we spent X number of dollars on it, what have we gotten for our dollars, and what percentage of the bogey have we retired? That's another question for the committee. Is that something the committee would like to see, or am I the only one asking for it? Just yay, nay? Like to see it. Okay. Is that the sense the committee would like to see that too? Mm-hmm. So somewhere, by all means, we can delete the slide, but let's not lose the concept of a dashboard.
So I'm not sure where we are on the town side with capital projects that we were concerned about.
Neither am I.
Okay, so we'll need to find that information.
Some of those are done or in the works, so we could certainly update it.
Okay.
Who should we talk to get more answer, to get a better feel for this?
Until we have a better sense of how things are going to operate on the town side, I'd say we talk to the new town manager and let him answer it.
Okay. Can you send me this presentation when you're done? Because I need to follow up on this slide.
I'm not sure what happened to this slide. I know we didn't leave it that way.
We folded it into
We
half
folded
a
into
slide.
another one?
We folded into maintaining facilities hasn't been prioritized.
That's right. All right.
These will all have to be updated based on what we
Yeah,
see with them.
that whole slide's gonna have to be
Yes.
revisited big time.
So again, we need to discuss the reserve policy that we're going to,
Back in the concerns we've, I think, discussed, maybe it's just been in my head, that we're not involved enough in the general school budgeting process. That unlike the town, which at least includes us in the discussions, the school is much more removed from us. And while we don't have specific concerns about the school capital needs being forthcoming, I think I at least have concerns about being a part of the school budgeting process, specifically with understanding the need for the upcoming contract changes, given that the staffing, et cetera, teaching is such a large part of their budget and becomes such a large part of ours. I would like us to be more, again, inserting ourselves into that process somehow.
Agreeing with what Jeff just said a couple minutes ago. Yes.
Yeah, but I'd like there to be a slide about that under concerns.
So that's more, that is more aggressive than this committee has been since I've been on it. I don't know what the historical level of, and/or what constraints there are on us for being a regional school district. I'm not at all against it. I just don't know what the constraints are. What is, again, on the sense of the committee on this one, do we want to be part of the contract negotiations? Can we even be part of the contract negotiations? Would a safe, if albeit perhaps not as big a step as you might like, would a safe step being that we would prefer to see the school budget Saturday be more akin to the municipal budget Saturday, where we get to ask questions? Although I do think they opened it up last year more so than in years past. Do we want to congratulate that behavior and encourage it, or do we want or do we want to say this is the year that we want to start getting in even deeper in advance of the next contract negotiations, which are 2 years away? Christy, I'll let you start since you brought it up. You want Jeff to go first? Jeff.
When I was on the committee 40 years ago, I sat with the accountant for the schools, and we went through their budget, and I was definitely a helper in developing that budget. Now we're only, what, 70% or 80% of the cost of this, comes to us versus Foxborough. But maybe the way to do it is to address it like the capital. School committee, you have a budget group?
They do.
How about a member of the FINCOM of Boxborough and a member of the FINCOM of Acton be, ex officio of that, or whatever you call it, of that group, and that way we're not trying to take over, but at least it's expressing, since it's such huge numbers, that there'd be a person from each finance committee.
Is that the sense of the committee? Do we want to make this request?
Well, let me just answer a couple other questions that have been raised. In the past, there was meetings that were the Finance Committee and the School Committee jointly, and we reviewed school budgets in some detail. It wasn't the budget Saturday dog and pony show. It was an evening meeting, and it was strictly, discussing the numbers. That went away, I don't know exactly when. And now we're invited to budget Saturday, but I should say we're there, but we're not really there. As far as the labor negotiations go, it is the practice of the school committee to remain in executive session until they reach an agreement, and only come out of executive session to vote to approve the agreement. In the past, there have been requests for a period of comment for the general public or the other committees of a week or so. To my knowledge, that's never been done. You're fighting an uphill battle. The town manager is a member of the regional school committee for that purpose only. I've certainly seen our town manager vote against school committee contracts to no avail. So collective bargaining is an area where typically finance committees are not allowed in. However, it is the biggest single factor in driving a budget. So if I were going to make a recommendation, I'd say let's go back to the idea of having at least a week of comment before they finalize their official position. Then we can weigh in, the Board of Selectmen could weigh in, Boxborough could weigh in, the townspeople could weigh in. But as it operates right now, it's pretty much a done deal as soon as they come out of executive session.
Furthermore, I'm assuming, and I don't know this, but I'm assuming that the only people that can vote on the collective bargaining are members in the executive session, and the only way on the executive session is to be part of the regional school agreement and how that's constituted. Correct?
The only people that vote are the regional school committee, plus I know the Acton town manager. I don't know about the Boxborough town administrator.
And is that ruled by the ABRSD agreement?
I believe it is. It's always been the case.
Okay. So I suspect trying to get a seat at the collective bargaining table may be a bridge too far for this group, and maybe certainly this year.
Mm-hmm.
But requesting a week of comment, commending them on being more open with us on asking questions on Budget Saturday, and even going one step further and trying to reconstitute this concept of a couple of meetings to get into the details of the budget in advance, I think are absolutely things that we should feel free to ask for.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It was a Thursday night. We kind of went to one of their meetings, but it was a joint meeting of the two groups. And we discussed the budget.
Now, just for my historical knowledge, did that stop as a result of ALG, or did that continue to occur even after ALG? Because isn't the ALG concept supposed to take care of this type of?
No, it was going on while we still had ALG.
Okay.
I'm not sure it stopped. No, I think it stopped before the full regionalization. So okay. It wasn't a casualty of the full regionalization. I think it had stopped before then.
Okay.
I think it's largely a question of superintendents and who's the chair of the school committee, how open they want to be about the process.
Okay, Jeff?
Thinking about it, we're a finance committee, so I would think our charter would be to more interact with the budget committee of the school committee than sitting in every school committee meeting and taking notes about all the curriculum and all those other kinds of things that we do. So I would just think the greatest benefit would be to be right there helping and figuring out where they are and what they're doing, and that would give us a heads up of direction they're going in, and we wouldn't be surprised by towards the end friendly meeting that we get together and trying to drill down in a one-time, they send you a 600-page document and we got an hour or a day to pond through it, as opposed to collaboratively working with whatever they call a budget committee. And it would...
Budget subcommittee?
Budget subcommittee, and quite frankly, that's where they should use advisors, and I would think they'd want an advisor from Boxborough and Acton and from a financial perspective.
Okay, Christy.
Back before there was regionalization, if one were to, say, decide to read the Acton School District School Committee meeting minutes, you'd know that they had a liaison who would come or watch things online and would actually present at the school committee meetings about what the finance committee says about things. And I don't think I've heard anything like that.
I have requested to know who this year's school committee liaison would be, and I was told that we would not have the answer until a specific meeting. I have to verify when that meeting was supposed to occur. But yes, it's on my list of things to follow up with the new chair.
Wonderful.
It's not just since regionalization, but yes, there used to, just as we have representatives at their meeting, they used to have representatives at our meeting.
And I made a point of contacting the new chair, congratulating her on her position and asking who the new liaison would be. And I got well, we'll let you know after a vote.
I would also wish that it hadn't taken Christine's meeting with Bill for us to understand more about the contracts, about the fact that these were not unusually large increases in contracts that should have been, there's just some big gap between what information is getting to us and what we're saying to them. It's just...
Well, it's also possible that the framing of the information could have changed over the 3 or 4 month period from when they first came to us and explained that there was a 13.1% increase over 3 years. The original framing was that it was a very difficult contract negotiation, and this is the best we could have gotten. Now, I will say that yes, this is the first I've heard that this was a catch-up year. How much of that is a reframing or not, I don't know what to say to that.
We can check it out. The information's out there. I will say that part of it was there were significant changes in the healthcare plan, and I think the 13% was the sweetener to make them go for higher deductibles and things like that. So.
The committee chairs will be assigned at the summer workshop.
Right, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
find. That's in July, right? It's the last week of July. I'm scrolling through trying to find where that email was that said that it was summer workshop.
I thought it was in August.
I hope not, but you may be right.
You're all seeing my stuff. Well, anyway. And the other thing I was going to say is, I don't have to just go to the meetings and audit them. If we have information that we feel is prescient, I'm happy to request to make a presentation at the school committee meetings, and perhaps us being more interactive on our side would encourage them to be more interactive on their side. Right. So yes, Christine.
Could you back up?
Yep.
I would love to be able to explain to someone who had seen this slide why we are no longer saying we were likely to deplete reserves. I don't want to keep going back with a slide like this every time and be like, no, really, we weren't crying wolf, it could have happened. And we need a simple explanation for that.
For why we ended up with more money back than we expected, and so our reserves have more money
But
in
this
them
still
than
is something to worry about going forward.
Right.
I think along those lines, a chart, and I kind of sketched it out already, would be illustrative and informative if we could have over the last 5-10 years a bar graph showing the actual reserve balances and how they have come down. And in the bottom, showing what the beginning balance was, what was used in the budget to balance the budget, and what came back in as turnbacks. So you could see over time and extrapolate.
This is why the point of view document is not one meeting thing and done.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk about this for months.
No, we're not.
Okay, so again, we have to hash out the reserve policy.
Question on that?
Yes.
Again, I think I asked this a year ago as far as where those thresholds came from.
The year
And,
before.
I think they've just been around for a while. And then more importantly, where have we lived in the last 10 years? Are we comfortably inside the upper and lower, or not?
I've been pretty comfortable. The only real depletion of reserves has been on land purchases, which for a few years, that was total of $3 or $4 million, you know. But to your point, we can talk about turnbacks, but we also have to explain where they come from, and it's not just under budgeting. It's, as Jeff said, it's increased valuation.
Jeff?
I'll do this, Mr. Chairman. It's your favorite topic. Why not put the reserve balances historically, and then a few years out, put a big red bar that shows how much capital we need to spend in the next few years, and let people understand that, you know, it may be 5% of spending, but it's about 0.005% of capital that we're going to have to spend in the next few years. And so it's almost a little nit in rounding compared to the liabilities coming down the pike. Does that express your concern, Mr. Chairman?
I'll slide the 20 to you later. Thank you for thank you for driving that point home.
Keep going. I've satisfied my
Your drive
justification
home?
of driving home.
Good.
I still feel like it's a good idea to explain OPEB,
Definitely.
and then, especially since we deal with it in the future. So the facility should save money by using in-house resources where possible. That is, I mean, we can keep that as our goal, but it seems like that is being done on the school side anyway.
Do we want to, rather than have a recommendation, rather than having this particular thing under recommendation, do we want to have a softer, kinder, gentler slide where we say things that we've been doing great, and, you know, kudos to the school district and the facilities groups for doing as much as they can in-house, and seeing if we can't come up with 4 or 5 other bullet points that we want to go, yay, us, we were doing great on this, so that this document is not just a doom and gloom, angry finance committee point of view.
First, I'm very surprised to hear you suggest that.
Well, I've been trying to turn over a new leaf, Mr. Noon. I've been told to be nicer, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it.
It is a good idea, because in the end, if not this one or the next one of these days we're going to ask for some serious money, and it would be nice to give the people some kudos in saying they're spending it wisely.
Perhaps you could call it concerns being addressed, concerns to be addressed. Because it's still a concern. I think somebody said, why drop it? Because it's still a concern that they never put enough money in capital in their operating budget. But it's now being addressed. And if we keep it on the list, if they drop the capital from the list, then you can slap their hands and say, it's no longer being addressed. Why? But it's a backhanded compliment because they're now addressing it.
Let's be even nicer than that, please. Just one slide, though. Limit it to one slide.
Can we just speak it nice?
No, let's actually have it in there so that we can point to it, because if it's not on paper at ALG, it doesn't exist. Yes?
I would like to call them positive improvements. That means that we haven't necessarily gotten all the way there, but we are pointing out that not only have things gotten better in some way, but that we have helped facilitate that.
I'm happy to let you people on the working group wordsmith that and come up with exactly the right phrase, but I'm not against it. There we go. I finally found the email.
All right. ABRSD should increase capital line item of the operating budget. They have increased it to $1 million. That's an achievement. The rest of it, okay, excellent. With this one, I believe it falls under this whole movement towards a 5-year capital plan.
sorry to interrupt, I finally found the email. I'm sorry that took so long. The answer was that the new liaison should be named after July 16th, which is the annual workshop. So it's next week.
Excellent. We'll see if we would love to have the new person. So this slide, I believe, will be changed to reflect our recommendation of the 5-year plan, if it is to happen,
Well, yeah,
as far as the school committee side goes.
careful. We are not recommending Bill's proposed 5-year plan because Bill's 5-year plan does not have us have a seat at the table.
The plan, perhaps not the process, is what we would recommend. The fact that there is a plan, a creating process. All right.
This is what happens when you try and edit live.
It's all good. All right, so we'll talk about that one in the future.
I think we can delete the bottom one.
Okay. Yeah. Less words.
Less words. Might even be able to collapse it all into one slide at that point.
Yeah, we'll change it. This, I believe, doesn't change because we're not there yet.
So last year, Dr. Evans did not like us stating it twice. The thrust of these bullet points had been winnowed down to so few words as to be less, did not have as much distinction between the two of them. I still remember there were two very specific different thoughts in there, but I'm afraid we've cut out so many words that it's not as powerful, the 2 points we were making. So on the one hand, we definitely want to drive home, please don't gild this new school in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not going to be reimbursed, it shouldn't be in the budget to begin with.
Okay?
They are not going to stick to that.
They're not.
There
gonna
are
stick
definitely
that.
going to be elements that will not be reimbursed.
So do we want to be, what's the terminology we want to use? We want to, saying strictly adhere is a zero-sum game.
Well, like she said, there will be elements in there that will not be reimbursed. Well, the logical question is, how are those elements going to be paid for?
So,
And why are they in the budget?
so they looked at, they're going to look at Parker Damon, and they're going to say, they're not going to pay for 2 gymnasiums, but we fight over this gymnasium all the time, and it is the biggest headache. And going forward, building another school to build 1 gymnasium is the most foolish thing we could do. And so it might behoove us to say, okay, it's worth it to foot the bill, to do it right for the longevity of the building, to have 2 gymnasiums. That's what I'm seeing. Their
Right.
argument is going to be on certain things.
And
Actually, I
so
think it's
I
more
would-
cafeteria than
and so
gymnasium.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that's a management problem. I'm not willing to pay more taxes for that.
And I would also go so far as to say that on the school building committee, the position that we, meaning I, have said is find out how many square feet the MSBA is going to reimburse and then figure out the best way to build to that reimbursement. And that's why I wanted us to maximize, to have the maximum reimbursement rate. Because I do not want there to be, I don't want to lose the scale of the twin school by then having 2 cafeterias and 2 libraries and 2, that's the whole purpose of this, is to get economies of scale. So I do think we need to make sure we have get economies of scale in this slide, in this recommendation. But
Plus-
strictly adhere, I'm worried about. Because if they do, sorry, just a second, Jeff. If they do come back to us and say, listen, we want to spend a little money to increase the size of the administrative offices so we can completely dump the admin building, I'd be on board with that. That's where it becomes a gray area that I'm willing to discuss with them. But no, I am not willing to foot 2 gyms. Am I willing to foot a couple extra square feet to get the admin offices larger so that we can dump the admin building? Yes, I am. So this is where it becomes a trade-off. Jeff?
The question is, how much the reimbursement is per student in terms of square foot of gymnasium. If they agree that the sum of the two gyms in the current school is the right allocation, then they get that much square footage of gymnasium. I guess I wouldn't really mind if they put an extra partition down the middle of the gymnasium for a few grand that allowed them to partition the gym into two sections instead of just having it always open to one massive gym. But I don't know why they wouldn't agree with that anyway, because most gymnasiums have at least two, if not one or two partitions, so you can have several basketball games or different kinds of things going on. So in essence, they can have two gyms, but it would be one physical location.
I just made up the gym thing.
No, you're not wrong. It's already been mentioned 3 separate
Oh,
times.
I just was pulling a thing. I actually think they're more likely to ask for 2 cafeterias.
Same problem. I will point out that in my school, the gym was divided in half, and it was boys on one side and girls on the other.
That's a completely different topic, Steve. We do need to work on this slide and drive home that we do not, yeah, we're going to have to work on this slide. Yep.
Do we have a River Street update? Did that happen at the last meeting? Did we find out what's happening at River Street?
Mr. Majors? Do we have a?
Do we have a River Street update? Was that at the last meeting that I missed?
Do we have,
My apologies. Do we have an update on that?
we'll get to that when we get to committee reports.
All
Let's
right,
try and
sorry.
get this done because we were ahead of schedule, now we're behind schedule.
All right, operating budget. This wording, we will have to
We're-
accommodate this year.
The unused tax levy capacity, that would be half of the remaining, because we did a third last year, that the new number would be half.
Slide will be updated for whatever the numbers look like when they come in, but yeah, it would be half of the remaining.
Okay.
We can discuss that later.
Let's discuss that later. Yeah, I still like that slide.
All right, and then we're on to our appendix need to be updated. I haven't done that yet.
Does Paul still hate the chart?
I'm sure he does.
Okay.
I have no doubt.
Christie, sorry.
On the upcoming overhead slide, I would like to explicitly call out the schools. That the school, we will for the twin building need.
One
the
slide
other one.
down, one slide down.
Yeah.
Our capital needs for town and school facilities require one or more overrides in the coming years.
There will be an override,
There will be
a capital override to pay for the twin school.
We could even go so far as to say the current plan is for a capital override fall of 2019.
Yeah, the plan is a better term. It won't be an override until the people say there'll be an
The
override.
current plan is for an override vote fall of 2019 for the twin school, and the fire station might come even before that. So, yep, we could have 2 capital overrides in the next 20 months. Frightening.
So anyway, that's our first pass through.
Excellent. Thank you. You were farther along than I thought, considering I thought we were just going to argue about reserves and capital tonight. Do we have minutes to approve? We do not have minutes to approve. Let's move on to subcommittee reports. Who would like to start? Mike, do we have anything to report on Minuteman?
Minuteman is like a broken record, on time, on budget, under budget,
Still happy with Skanska?
under time.
Still happy with Skanska?
We're happy with Skanska, Gilbane, and Bose, the architect as well.
Do you have anything to share on Main Street?
Yes, we do. Actually, the town of Acton got a grant from the state to study the feasibility of some of those ideas with a boutique hotel like we were talking about, and some, probably some retail piece and maybe residential. However, the results of that study, the study has been completed. The grant was awarded, the study was started, the study was completed, but we won't find out the results of the study until the 23rd. So after that, we will have a specific update for you.
Fair enough.
Also, following up on the other action items, I got a note from the selectmen that the town manager and Selby will be meeting with Associated Environmental Services. Just have them come in and sort of bring the town up to date on what's going on there.
Great. Thank you. Any other subcommittees to report on?
I attended the residences at Kelly's Corner meeting yesterday held by the zoning board. They have proposed new construction of 31 units for seniors of age 62 plus and eligible persons with disabilities. The building proposed will be 3 floors and will have elevators, exercise room, community room, storage, and 41 parking spaces. And we are talking about 0.89 acres of land. And these units will be income restricted. And it's on par with Kelly's Corner and its housing production plan with easy access to 111 and 27. And according to AHA, there are currently 70 plus seniors on the waiting list for housing. And so this will be based on the lottery, and they do give preference. I think it's the Acton residents who would be eligible for it first. And so the good thing about this, all the 31 units will qualify towards affordable housing, and this will bring it up to 6.7% of the 10% required for the town. And there were a couple of concerns that were raised by the public, and one of them was 31 units is too crowded for 0.89 acre of land, and it's right opposite the schools. The traffic study was waived due to the nature of the project. It's a small project and it doesn't require traffic study. And the 3 floors concern was raised, and the building height will be about 32 feet. And currently the property is zoned to accommodate 36 feet height of a building. And since the developers are non-profit, it's Common Ground Corporation, and the funding sources are mainly through DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, and other tax credits. For us accessing the public funds, the developers need a permit in hand, and this development might take about 2 years, minimum of 2 years, and a maximum of 3 years for groundbreaking. So these are the notes that I had, and yeah, that's about it. Anybody else?
Thank you very much. Were there, it's not only is it income restricted, but it's also age restricted, correct?
Yes, it is.
Stupid question. Are we expecting any impact to enrollment?
of the schools.
Elderly.
So are there going to be a bunch of grandparents with grandkids? Or is it going to be, or not?
I have no idea.
Excuse me, I had a question. What parcel of land are they talking about?
Oops, it's 446 Mass Ave.
Where is that?
It's right opposite the driveway of the entrance to the junior high, the Charter Road. And it's a piece of property right across.
So currently it's an existing house or something with some property? Okay, all right. I think I know where it is.
Christine?
And if I understand correctly, they're just one bedroom, right?
Yes, it's going to be one-bedroom
So,
units.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know there are
So-
couches, but it seems unlikely that this would have an effect
Yeah,
on enrollment.
Yeah.
Also, if you're
Good job.
55 or older community, you're not allowed to have a resident person under the age of that. You can visit, but they wouldn't be living with them to go to the schools.
Any other subcommittee reports? Go ahead, Mr. Olhoff.
The train station committee met, and one thing we had discussed was there's always a discussion around the need for parking at the train station, and there's always, specifically over the last year, there's been a lot more attendance from residents who have to juggle their personal schedules or what have you, and the parking lot fills up very quickly, and just what are the alternatives for traffic or for parking in South Acton. And this is just very early stages, but, you know, we've been going back and forth about alternatives and about whether there would ever potentially be consideration around a parking deck in the existing lot that's there, and then whether we should have a traffic study along those lines. One suggestion that was made lately was the River Street property that the town purchased and I believe still owns and hasn't been reimbursed from the CPA, is it doesn't look like there's a use at this point that's identified for it, to my knowledge, and we had discussed the option of potentially using that land as parking. So this is very early on. I just mentioned these options. So the committee is, there's been a more dramatic increase just in the need for parking in South Acton, and it seems like the population of the town continues to grow. There continue to be more commuters into the city. The surrounding area community parking lots are generally full, and they're looking at alternatives, and South Acton being pretty constrained due to a variety of reasons is very limited in what options are there. So again, premature to answer many questions on this front, but just want to make everyone aware.
Understand that it's premature to answer the questions, but two questions I'd like to ask. How far is it from the River Street property? Is that walkable in the morning? Would you need a shuttle?
There's been no studies done or anything, and I think the River Street property itself has its own committee that's investigating uses for the land, and there's some interest in conservation or historical needs and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that.
And secondarily, is there any guidance from the MBTA on, please God, don't have 380 people try and get on the bus, get on the train at the exact same time? Do we reach a point where we could have ended up building more parking than the train could possibly tolerate in a morning rush? I don't expect an answer now, just a question that came to my mind.
No, the train schedule has been set since they did some alterations about a year or so ago. They double-tracked a lot of the line that wasn't double-tracked, and they changed a lot of the signaling, and I think that schedule is set. There's one train in particular in the morning that's extremely popular. It's an earlier train, but there's a lot of commuters who have need for, to park at 8 a.m. or even later than that, and the parking lot's generally full before 7 a.m. And the parking has grown over the last several years, and there's been a lot of unique ways of, including shuttle usage and so on around the town. So it's not necessarily just South Acton, but it's just a challenge, and it's just been amazing to me that the train station has been built for a couple of years now. Frankly, I thought the committee may have been disbanded at this point, and there's just overwhelming demand. Just people showing up with their kids at the meetings at 8 o'clock at night to talk about, I'm juggling my kids, and now I'm here at this meeting, and this is so important, and so it's just interesting, just that it's consistent now versus 3 years ago when it was one person here and there. Now there's 2 or 3 people at every meeting
Thank you.
wanting to talk about it.
Did you have a question?
You mentioned shuttles. I know we use that widely when we lived in West Acton. Is that well used?
I believe that its usage has gone up dramatically. I don't have the statistics or data in front of me, but just anecdotally, times that I've taken it 3 or 4 years ago, I would be the only one on it. And now lately, there could be 8 or 9, 10 people on it sometimes. And I can't tell you what those lots are, whether they're capacity. And again, there's just a lot of options that have been expanded. I mean, there's several stops now for the shuttles. The shuttles run all the time. They seem to be much more better utilized. I know in the past, we've done more rigorous work around understanding that.
I was also wondering along those lines, when my husband was considering a commute into Boston, one thing we noticed is that the fire station lot here isn't well used. And with the bus we have through town, you can't line it up with the train schedule time. So I was wondering if there was any look into having other shuttles from other parking lot locations.
And there's I think it's the Mount Calvary Church on, is it Mass Ave that's there, that is a stop. And then there's, interestingly enough, there's a shuttle that comes from, is it the Mill and Main Plaza in Maynard? That's, I think, pretty well used, I think. So there's multiple shuttles that now come into the station. And we even started receiving complaints that the bike lockers are full, that there's like no parking for bikes. And then the rail trail, the Assabet River Rail Trail, you know, you can get on there. So there's not any easy answers, and I don't mention any of this just casually. It's just that I think that there's some trade-offs that might need to be made about what alternatives are done down there. And I don't think anybody's jumping up and down saying, oh, a parking deck in South Acton, just what I wanted. But it's an option, and it could be, you know, this is like a real problem that affects hundreds of people on a daily basis. It's not, you know, a smaller scale project. And so more to come, but the one finance area was whether we should have a traffic study. And I mean, traffic's an interesting area. Just, you know, there's all kinds of things that get impacted. Kelly's Corner can get really impacted if you had a lot there, for example, double the lot there. So it goes on and on and on. So anyways, no numbers or nothing, but just FYI.
If there are no other subcommittee reports, I've got 2 things. One is the school building committee is at the stage where we received and reviewed 5 separate designer proposals. The next step is for the 3 representatives of ABRSD to go in front of the MSBA, where we will be outnumbered 13-3 for the selection of the designer. We did more or less throw out 2 of the design proposals. One we kind of did a meh on, and the other 2 are our leading choices, which we will hopefully land on one of those at the next meeting of the MSBA Design Review Committee, which is just a couple of weeks from now, actually. So that definitely is moving forward. I did ask an architect friend of mine if 5 responses was normal, and he said anything over 3 is great and is fine as gravy, but 5 is light. And I asked him why he thought we were on the light side, and he said, well, there's 2 reasons. One, Doran Whittier did the study, and they're presenting here as well, so they are perceived to have had a leg up. I can tell you from sitting in that in the committee meeting, Doran Whittier did not have a leg up. They are one of the 2 that survived, but they were not we're not allowed to rank them. We were expressly told we were not allowed to rank them. But Doran Whittier did not come through as the odds-on favorite. And then the other reason my architect friend said we did not get that many responses is that it's boom times in the school building industry, that many municipalities are trying to build their schools now before the interest rates climb. And so there are many companies may already have bitten off enough that they didn't want to bite off anymore. So that was mildly disturbing to me. Mike, you wanted to add to that? And then I have one other thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when choosing these guys, you really look at their background. If they have a lot of experience building schools and building other municipal properties, government buildings, things of that nature, university-type structures, you're going to hire someone that knows what they're doing.
Yep.
It's been around the block before. So if they don't have that in their resume, I think you keep looking.
I'd say that I thought that at first blush, all 5 of them are qualified. All 5 of them have some level of recent experience with MSBA projects, but definitely some were better than others, better presented than others. One other piece of business that I would like to address is the next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 24th. You've all probably received emails saying that this room is already going to be in use for a housing forum. It was requested of me to vacate this room and let the housing forum continue, and I did do that. So our next meeting will be in the Public Safety Building. That said, unless we are worried about quorum issues, I would like a volunteer, somebody, since the meetings are going to be concurrent, I would like a volunteer to go and sit in that meeting and be our eyes and ears on that forum, which is happening in this place at that time. I don't need to have it right now, but if somebody would like to email me in the next couple of days saying that they would like to be the volunteer to be our unofficial one-time liaison to this housing meeting, please do reach out to me on that. Our agenda has public participation as the first item. So even though you are way late, I'm going to be happy that we had a member of the public show up at all, and I'll give you the floor for just a couple of minutes because you are between us and the end of the meeting.
Thank you. And the reason is that we have the Green Acton meeting at the library, but we get kicked out at 9. The library toss us out, so that lets me come here. So thank you very much. I have a couple questions and then a couple comments. The land purchase item, which I'm super glad that the FinCom's thinking longer term and including the idea of land purchases in the planning. If the larger lots are not available because the people haven't sold it or whatever, is there flexibility for smaller strategic lots that do come up really quickly? Like, for example, the daycare center, the Walker property, whatever it's called, 53 River, Main Street. That was for sale. The corner of that made all of that fit together was for sale for $200,000. So just think about that relative to the $2.2 million we sent. So strategic lots come up available all the time, and that gets me to I have another question. Well, the housing forum is the result of this consultant, a PR consultant who was hired by town staff to convince us that we need more high-density housing, that's the only way we can get the business development, economic development that we want. So I urge you to read the RFP for that PR consultant before you go to that housing forum. The Economic Development Committee was somehow involved in this. I'm not sure if it was, how that all worked out, but I never, you can talk about that, Mike.
Well, actually, we weren't involved.
Yeah, exactly. But they were invited to this meeting that then concluded with them saying that they supported it or something. And so I think that there's a little bit of a mix-up relative to how town staff can hire a PR consultant to convince people of a zoning, the Kmart zoning. Anyway, you all can make your own decision. But I'm happy to send that link. If you haven't seen it, would you like me to? I'll send you that link. Okay. Land purchase, cumulative planning. So I asked Roland Bartle in a zoning board of appeals meeting, because there was a question about traffic on one of these 40Bs. I said that it seems like every project has no impact on traffic, on water, on all of our facilities and town resources, yet over time, if anybody's been living here, they know there's a big impact. So I asked him, where's the cumulative planning? What cumulative planning is being done? I work in a lot of private enterprises, and we look at balance sheets, we look at the change in the balance sheets of assets, fixed assets like road capacity, water capacity, school capacity, for example. And each time you make a decision, that impacts the build-out and what's planned to be used for that capacity? How does that impact what's left for the build-out? And then when do you cross the line to having to build a lot of other infrastructure? And how does that impact financial planning? I think it's, and Roland's response was, I don't do that. He does project to project. And I said, well, why don't you do that? And he said, nobody's ever told him to. So I think that it's up to somebody and the executive boards to actually request that on a yearly basis, these things are reported. How much of our water capacity is used? How much of our road capacity is now being used, et cetera. And then I did want to make two other comments. The parking garage, I just don't want you to forget that this room was standing room only with people that were against such a thing. So just be aware of that. And maybe things have changed, I don't know. The sewer, I've been looking at this West Acton sewer thing, and I have a lot of questions and concerns. And the proponents are trying to get that onto the school timeframe to have the schools commit to being part of the West Acton sewer plan. I started looking at some historical information, and the original sewer flyer I came up with that said that this is the answer to shifting our tax burden to be commercial because the sewers will change all that. And I started looking at the permits that have been approved along the sewer, and I believe it's a major contributor to shifting us from 85% when I was looking at this last to, I think it's almost 90% now residential. So the permits that are being approved along the sewer are residential, 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 residential. So be aware of that. And then I think that's it. So thank you, and I'm happy to help with any cumulative planning, scope of work, or key metrics, key performance indicators that can help us plan better. And one last thing is that I looked at the Trust for Public Lands recommended acres per person. The open space plan had the number of acres per person has been reduced in the last 10 years by almost 20%. We are now below the number of acres that cities have preserved. So Philadelphia, for example, has 15% more land preserved per capita than Acton does. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a criticism of the infographics and I think it's quite misleading. You all see underground and some issues I have with the numbers being presented in a way that makes it look like it's like a sales document for building. Like, we have a lot of poor people, so therefore we need building. But the building that they're promoting isn't for poor people. So it's misleading to use numbers. It's like you're using poor people as a pawn. So I urge you to look at these numbers more carefully. And the averages that they're presenting, for example, prices have gone up so much. Well, if you take out all of the mansions and the things that aren't for people that are struggling, then the prices have gone up, they haven't gone up. So that's misleading. Another thing is that if you look at the income level, so if you look at in 2006, the low income, what's defined as legally as low income versus what it's defined as now, the low income has risen almost 10% per year.
Tara, this is not on our agenda.
All right, thanks.
This is enough.
But it hasn't gone up 10% a year, thank you.
Is there any other business?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.